Angela and Garrett Holmes were taken aback when they received a letter from the housing association demanding the removal of Angela's wheelchair ramp. They initially thought it was a mistake, but things took a more serious turn when the association put a lien on their house. The couple knew they had to take action to fight back against this unexpected demand. Before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. For a decade, Angela, Garrett, and their young daughter Mary lived peacefully in their Mount Juliet residence with no issues from their community or housing association. However, on December 15, 2017, a letter arrived that would rock their world. The family was taken aback by the unexpected communication and the impact it would have on their lives. Throughout their 10-year stay, not one complaint was made against the Holmes. Even the wheelchair ramp built by Angela went unnoticed by fellow tenants in the apartment complex, who were happy to offer assistance without prompting. So, what could be the reason behind the sudden change of tone? The question lingers in the air as the Holmes try to make sense of the unexpected situation. Upon pondering her predicament, Angela realized that a new president had been appointed to the HOA board and had made comments regarding the wheelchair ramp. She began to suspect that this new leader may be the one behind the complaint. Nevertheless, Angela was resolved not to comply, regardless of who was responsible. Ultimately, she remained determined to stand up for her rights and the welfare of her family. Despite ignoring the frequent letters regarding her wheelchair ramp, Angela was shocked when an urgent threat arrived, demanding her appearance to explain her actions or suffer the consequences. While taken aback, Angela remained steadfast in her belief that her actions were just and refused to back down in the face of pressure. The escalation of the dispute had forced her to take action. Angela took matters into her own hands and confronted the Housing Association Board to inquire about their demand for her to remove her wheelchair ramp. Despite the board's discomfort with the question, the new president stated that it was unsightly, leaving Angela with no doubt where she stood. In a show of determination, she refused to comply with the unreasonable request and left the office, standing up for her rights. The day after Angela refused to remove her wheelchair ramp, she received a notification from the Housing Association that a lien had been placed on her house. The only way to have it removed was to comply with the request to remove the ramp. Although outraged by the situation, Angela found herself with no choice but to consider her options, as ignoring the lien was not a viable solution. With a heavy heart, Angela asked Garrett if he could bring the ramp into the house. He refused at first, stating that they didn't have to comply with such a ridiculous request. But once Angela informed him of the lien, his tone changed. They had effectively been blackmailed into accepting the request, and it would only get worse if they didn't comply. But would that hold the couple back? That night, Angela and Garrett sat down to discuss their options. They had two different opinions regarding the matter, and they needed to decide which path they were going to take. But what options did they have? And were any of those options feasible for them? Or would the HOA end up being the winner in this case? Garrett wanted to fight back with full force. He wanted to take the HOA on head-on, and he was even willing to go to court if he needed to, but Angela wasn't too sure that it was the right way to go about things. She didn't want any more problems than she already had, especially not in the place where they were living. But she had no idea just how cruel their HOA could be. Garrett voiced his opinion on the matter. He told his wife that the HOA had no grounds to do something like this. He may have been right, but Angela was scared of what the HOA could do to them if they didn't comply. She'd heard horror stories of just how much power they actually had. In some places, an HOA could force the occupants to move out. She was terrified of them. Despite Angela's pleas, Garrett was listening to her. He was angered by the HOA and told her he was going to try and threaten them as they had threatened her. She knew that it could only end in tragedy. She could already tell that Garrett's mind was made up, and there was no stopping him. She went to bed that night in a panic. She had no idea what would happen in the morning. The next morning, Angela woke up, but her husband wasn't in bed. He didn't normally wake up before her. She felt anxiety grip her as she propped herself onto her wheelchair and made her way through the house. Had he already left to confront the HOA? She hoped she wasn't too late. But once she got to the kitchen, she couldn't believe what she saw. Angela found Garrett in the kitchen, but he wasn't doing what she suspected. He was busy making breakfast. He had just made Mary her food and told her to come to the table. Hershers was next. He put a plate of scrambled eggs down on her plate, but why was he going out of his way? Was he really being a good dad, or was there something else? "I thought I'd make breakfast before I head out," he said after kissing her on the forehead, but alarm bells went off in her head at the mention of heading out. "Where are you going?" a worried Angela asked her husband. He replied, "Don't worry, I just want to talk to the people trying to take away your ramp. We both know it isn't fair." As much as Angela didn't like the idea, she knew that it made sense. What they were doing was completely unreasonable. Maybe Garrett could make them understand? She just didn't like the implications that something bad might happen. Still, maybe he was right. They each had their own way of dealing with conflict, and he had the right to do what he needed to. Angela wanted to lie low. She wanted this whole situation to just blow over and for everyone to forget about this incident. She was sure that things would return to normal once all this calmed down. After all, the HOA quickly moved on to other homeowners with new violations. In her mind, everything would just work out naturally. But Garrett wasn't convinced. He was sure his wife would stay cooped up forever. Was he right, or was he just overreacting? Only time would tell them what decision was the right one. Either one could fail miserably and leave them in a worse off position than they were in now. But they still had to choose one. They just hoped they chose wisely. The couple was unsure of how to proceed. They wanted the ramp to be put back up, but they didn't want to go through all of the hassles with the housing association. What was the best way for them to deal with this? Should they go with Garrett's choice, or was it better for them to lie low and let this blow over? Angela was convinced that they didn't have a choice but to agree with what they were told. All she wanted was for things to return to normal, but she had no idea what the HOA had in store for her. Homeowners associations often had a bad reputation in a lot of places. Most homeowners dreaded a letter from them, and now that Angela had received one, things would never be normal again. Weeks had gone by, and the claustrophobic feeling she had was only getting worse. Angela needed to do something to get herself out of that trap. It felt like her own home was suffocating her, and because of that, she started rolling through the halls of the building. Unfortunately, that only made matters worse. Angela tried complying by staying indoors, but roaming her halls presented a second problem that they didn't appreciate. One morning, Angela got another email from them. Anxiety flooded her system. What did they want from her? She opened the email while holding her breath, but it was just as bad as she thought it was going to be. The housing association hadn't stopped harassing Angela, and now that she was moving up and down the halls, things were only getting worse. She received letters from them daily stating that she was disrupting the peace, but she didn't know what else to do. She could either be locked up or she could move a little. She preferred the second option. After a month of endless complaints and being cooped up in her home, Angela broke down. She simply couldn't take it anymore. She was done with the constant complaints. The need to get out was gnawing at Angela like a starving dog. She was constantly anxious, and she could barely stay in one spot. She had tried everything to get her mind off the situation she was in, and in the beginning, it worked. But that time came and went. Now getting out was all she could think about. Angela felt like she was losing her mind. She had never felt this kind of anxiety in her life. She had never felt this type of urgency before either. The point had come for her to act. She could no longer deny that. But what could she do? Did she really have to face this problem head on? Needing a break, Angela visited her next-door neighbor, June. A chat with the older woman always helped, but this time June had something important to say. June informed Angela that the housing association had no legal grounds for their demands. If Angela took them to court, they wouldn't stand a chance. This sparked something in her. Maybe she could turn the tables. She thanked June and immediately called a lawyer. After a few calls, she found the right lawyer. He was shocked by what Angela was facing and laid out her legal options. June had been right, but there were missing details. Proof was everything. If Angela wanted justice, she needed solid evidence. The lawyer agreed to take the case, but warned it would be tough. They could argue the association was not accommodating disabled individuals, but that alone wouldn't be enough. Angela, however, had more information to reveal. The next day, she brought a stack of letters, complaints about her ramp, accusations of disturbance, all documented evidence of discrimination. The lawyer saw an opportunity. The HOA had made no effort to hide their bias, and that would be their downfall. Armed with evidence, Angela took the association to court. The judge was appalled by the blatant discrimination and decided to make an example of them. The court ruled in Angela's favor. The HOA had violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. The judge ordered them to revoke the lien on Angela's property and compensate her for the ordeal they had put her through. Angela didn't just win the case, she made a statement. With her compensation, she pulled off the ultimate act of revenge. She bought the new president's state-of-the-art apartment.